"Don't come in. Leave fast," the waiter whispered, eyes wide. I sprinted to my car, heart pounding, and 10 minutes later the sirens, smoke, and chaos behind me confirmed I'd escaped something deadly. Okay, so where do I even begin? It feels like a lifetime ago, but it was only a few months. Julian and I had just separated officially on paper, but emotionally, it was a gaping wound. I'm Veronica, 33, a graphic designer, and honestly, I was just trying to survive. Every morning felt like peeling myself off the mattress, the weight of the new reality pressing down on my chest. The silence in our apartment, now my apartment, after he moved out, was deafening. It was a constant, low hum of absence that grated on my nerves. Our son, he's everything to me. He was the reason I was so damn desperate to keep things civilized with Julian. I wanted him to have a stable, if separated, family. No screaming matches, no slammed doors, no walking on emotional landmines every time his parents were in the same room. I was still raw from the split, yeah. My heart felt like it had been put through a shredder, but I was determined to be the bigger person. I clung to that idea like a lifeline, hoping beyond hope that we could navigate this whole co-parenting thing without too much drama. I pictured polite texts, calm exchanges at school pickup, maybe even a shared coffee once in a blue moon to discuss our son's future. A naive fantasy, looking back. Julian, though, he never really accepted that I had left. Not truly. It was like he couldn't compute that I, Veronica, had dared to make such a monumental decision for myself. I saw the resentment festering in his eyes whenever we had to speak, a thinly veiled anger beneath his forced smiles. He resented my independence, I think, the fact that I wasn't just his anymore, wasn't just an extension of his life. Our attempts at civilized communication, those careful, measured conversations I'd rehearse in my head, often felt less like diplomacy and more like walking on eggshells on a minefield. My stomach would knot before every phone call, every text exchange. I'd analyze his tone, his word choice, searching for hidden meanings, preparing myself for the inevitable passive-aggressive jab. It was exhausting, utterly draining, and I felt like I was constantly holding my breath. And then there was Leo, Julian's friend. Calling him a friend feels wrong, honestly. He was more like a shadow, a malevolent spirit that always seemed to materialize out of nowhere whenever Julian was in some sort of financial bind or, more ominously, plotting something questionable. Leo was always there, lurking in the background, a silent nod of approval to Julian's worst impulses. I'd see him at family gatherings even after the separation, just there, observing. His presence always made the hairs on my arms stand up, a prickle of unease I could never quite shake. I thought I knew the dynamic, you know? I thought I had Julian's number, understood his manipulative little games, his financial desperation. I dismissed Leo as just part of Julian's shady entourage, a symptom of his bad decisions. But God, I was about to learn just how little I truly understood. I had no idea the depths of depravity he was capable of, or how close I was to falling into them myself. Looking back now, with the chilling clarity of hindsight, the signs were absolutely, unequivocally there. How I missed them, how I rationalized them away, makes my stomach churn even now. Julian couldn't stand that I had finally left. It wasn't just a casual annoyance, it was a deep, burning affront to his ego. Every conversation, every shared glance was laced with it. He frequently brought up how much I'd abandoned him. Not just him, but us, our family, our future. He'd say things like, "It's a shame you gave up so easily, Veronica. Some people fight for what they have." His eyes boring into mine, trying to make me feel small, regretful. Or he'd lament, "Our son deserves two parents who are committed, not one who just walks away when things get tough." The words would hang in the air, heavy and accusatory, making my chest tighten with a mix of guilt and pure, unadulterated rage. I felt like I was constantly defending my decision, even to myself, and his constant jabs just picked at that raw wound. Then there was the money. Oh God, the money. He'd often subtly, or not so subtly, remind me of his financial woes. It started small, a sigh about a car repair, a casual mention of a late payment for some loan or other. But it quickly escalated. He'd hint, quite explicitly, that our separation agreement should definitely include me supporting some of his outstanding debts until things calm down. He'd paint this picture of himself as a struggling martyr, buried under bills, all because I had chosen to leave. You know, Veronica, if you hadn't pulled the rug out from under me, I wouldn't be in this bind. A little help, just until I get back on my feet, would really show you care about our son's stability. My jaw would clench so hard it ached. Care about our son's stability? Or care about your wallet? It felt manipulative, a blatant attempt to keep me tethered to his financial drama, even after I'd tried so hard to cut ties. I remember one conversation where he actually pulled out a stack of overdue bills, fanning them out on the table like a dealer showing his hand, his expression a mix of pleading and accusation. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine, a familiar sensation whenever his financial desperation surfaced. And the couple dinners. Even after we were clearly, unequivocally separated, he had this knack for pushing for them, always in odd, out-of-the-way places. Not our usual spots, not places that held any sentimental value. Always new, sometimes a bit obscure, in parts of town I wasn't super familiar with. He'd insist, "We need to talk calmly, Veronica, for our son, about the future. Maybe we can still save the marriage, just talk things through, you know?" He'd frame it as me being unreasonable if I said no, as me not caring enough about our son. I'd reluctantly agree, my gut twisting. Each time I'd arrive feeling a sense of unease, the kind where the hair on your arm stands up a little. The restaurants themselves weren't necessarily bad, but they were never comfortable. Too dimly lit, too loud, too empty. I remember one place, a fusion restaurant with weird art, where he spent more time looking over my shoulder than at me, his eyes darting around the room, almost as if he was waiting for something. The conversations were never about saving the marriage, likes, of course. They always circled back to his financial predicaments, or how I was abandoning him. I'd leave those dinners feeling utterly drained, my head pounding, my throat tight from holding back all the things I really wanted to say. And Leo, his shadow. He was always in the periphery. Not always at the dinners, thankfully, but whenever Julian had an agenda, Leo seemed to materialize. I'd see him across a parking lot after a contentious co-parenting exchange, leaning against his beat-up car, just watching. Or I'd catch a glimpse of him through the window of a cafe where Julian and I were discussing finances. He was a silent, watchful presence, his eyes often narrowed, observing everything. It wasn't just my imagination. It was a tangible feeling, like being under surveillance. His presence always sent a shiver down my spine, a sense of foreboding that I attributed to his general shifty nature. I dismissed these as Julian's typical manipulative quirks, you know? Just his usual brand of emotional blackmail, his desperate attempts to cling to me or to my money. I saw them as isolated incidents, annoying but harmless, part of the messy breakup process. I was so focused on being the bigger person, on keeping things civilized for our son, that I genuinely believed I was just navigating Julian's emotional landscape. I didn't recognize them as threads in a much, much darker tapestry. I had no idea that these seemingly minor annoyances, these red flags I casually folded away, were actually pieces of a terrifying puzzle that was slowly, meticulously being assembled around me. I was so blind, so foolishly determined to see the best in a man who clearly had none left. Okay, so the stage was set, right? All those red flags waving, all those gut feelings I ignored. Then came the invitation from Julian, smooth as ever, insisting we meet for dinner to talk calmly about the separation. He picked a trendy new place in Puebla, one of those spots everyone was buzzing about, all sleek lines and exposed brick. He set the time, 8 p.m., and even conveniently arranged a sitter for our son, almost as if he'd anticipated my usual excuse. My stomach was already churning, a familiar clench of dread. I knew what these calm talks usually devolved into. Him blaming me, him subtly asking for money, him trying to make me feel guilty. But I forced myself to put on a brave face, to tell myself I was doing this for our son, for the hope of a peaceful co-parenting future. I was running a bit late that night, which, looking back, might have been the luckiest thing that ever happened to me. Traffic was a nightmare, and I was already fuming, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my mind buzzing with all the polite but firm rebuttals I'd have to deliver. I finally pulled into the bustling commercial district, the air thick with the smell of exhaust and street food, the sound of distant music mixing with car horns. The restaurant had valet parking, but the lot was packed, so I ended up parking a few blocks away, near a dimly lit alley. I practically sprinted across the parking lot, my heels clicking sharply on the asphalt, my purse clutched tight. My heart was already pounding, not from exertion, but from the anxiety of facing Julian again. I could feel a bead of sweat tracing a path down my temple, despite the evening chill. I mentally rehearsed my opening lines, trying to project an aura of calm resilience. "Hi, Julian. Thanks for meeting. I thought we could discuss the visitation schedule for next month." I reached the entrance, a heavy wooden door with a sleek, minimalist handle. My hand was just reaching out, my fingers brushing against the cool metal, when the door practically burst open. A young waiter, no older than 20, maybe 22, stumbled out, almost colliding with me. He was wearing the restaurant's crisp uniform, but it looked disheveled, pulled taut in places, as if he'd just been through a struggle. His eyes. God, his eyes. They were huge, dilated, filled with a raw, visceral panic that instantly slammed into me, cutting through my own pre-dinner anxieties like a knife. He looked absolutely terrified, his chest heaving, his face pale under the dim streetlights. He stared at me for a split second, and then a flicker of recognition crossed his face. "Veronica?" he whispered, his voice barely audible above the street noise, ragged with fear. I recognize you. From photos on Julian's phone." My blood ran cold. Photos on Julian's phone? That was an odd detail. Before I could even process that, or ask him what the hell was going on, he leaned in, his breath hot and frantic against my ear. His voice dropped to a desperate, guttural whisper that sliced through the mundane sounds of the city, cutting straight to my core. "Don't come in. Leave fast. Please." That was all. No explanation, no time for questions, even if my brain had been capable of forming them. Something in his raw, unadulterated fear, more than his actual words, compelled me. It wasn't just panic. It was pure, unadulterated terror radiating off him in waves. My instincts, which I'd suppressed for so long with Julian, screamed at me. Every cell in my body was suddenly vibrating with a primal urge to flee. My hand dropped from the doorknob as if it were burning. I didn't even think. I just turned around, my feet moving before my brain caught up and started walking back the way I came, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The adrenaline surged through me, a bitter metallic taste in my mouth, making my limbs feel both heavy and strangely light. I didn't run, not immediately. I walked fast, my head on a swivel, my eyes darting around, searching for, I don't know what. Danger. Confirmation? My mind was a jumbled mess of what was that? And am I crazy? I reached my car, fumbling with my keys, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped them. The car door felt like a sanctuary as I slammed it shut, locking it with a click that echoed too loudly in the sudden quiet. My breath hitched in my throat. I started the engine, my foot heavy on the gas, and peeled out of that parking lot, not caring about speed limits or traffic laws. I just had to get away. My mind was screaming for clarity, but all I had was a deafening silence, and the image of that waiter's terrified eyes burned into my retina. I drove, shaky and utterly confused, glancing nervously in my rearview mirror every few seconds, half expecting to see someone following me. The confusion was a thick fog, but underlying it was a cold, creeping sense of dread. I must have been driving for about 10 minutes, maybe 15, through the winding streets of Puebla, my hands still gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white when the sirens started. First one, then two, then a whole cacophony of them, wailing and screaming past me in the opposite direction, their red and blue lights flashing wildly in my rearview mirror, painting the night with urgent streaks of color. They were heading exactly back towards the commercial district I had just fled. My stomach dropped. Then my phone started buzzing, vibrating relentlessly on the passenger seat, a frantic, insistent rhythm against the silence of my car. I didn't dare look at it, not yet. My gaze was fixed on the road ahead, but my peripheral vision caught the glow of something enormous in the distance, a monstrous orange and red pulsing against the night sky, growing brighter with every second. Smoke, thick and black, billowed upwards, a terrifying plume against the stars. It was unmistakable. The restaurant was on fire, and I had just driven away from it seconds before. Shock swallowed me whole, absolutely, completely swallowed me. I remember pulling over to the side of the road, my hands still locked white-knuckled on the steering wheel, the car engine idling, a low hum that suddenly felt deafening. The sheer, monstrous image of those flames towering against the night sky, the terrifying plume of black smoke, the incessant wail of the sirens echoing in my chest. It all hit me like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that left me breathless. My vision blurred, not with tears, but with the searing reality of what I was witnessing, what I had just escaped. The chaos that must have been unfolding back there, the screaming, the panic, the sheer enormity of it all. It made my head spin. I felt a dizzying nausea rise in my throat, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm that felt like it was trying to break free. But then, almost immediately, as the initial, raw terror began to subside, a different, colder wave washed over me. It wasn't, "Is Julian okay?" or, "Oh my God, what happened to everyone?" No, my first, instinctive thought, cutting through the haze of shock with chilling clarity, was, what did he do? Just like that. Not a question of concern, but a question of accusation. It was a visceral, guttural reaction, born from years of dealing with his manipulations, his financial desperation, his thinly veiled anger. It wasn't rational, not in that moment, but it was absolutely undeniable. The thought was a sharp, ugly shard of ice in my chest, replacing the burning heat of the fire with a different kind of dread. My phone, which had been buzzing relentlessly, finally caught my attention. It was a flurry of messages, news alerts, social media posts, all confirming the horror. A massive fire at the trendy new restaurant in Puebla. The reports initially were vague, then coalesced into a single official narrative: a faulty kitchen appliance, an accidental blaze. They called it a tragic accident. My mind, however, was already looping back to the waiter. That young man, Mateo. His huge, terrified eyes. His frantic whisper, hot against my ear. "Don't come in, leave fast, please." That phrase, those two words, "leave fast," kept echoing in my head. A relentless, damning refrain. It clashed violently with the official story, creating a dissonance that scraped at my nerves. An accident? A faulty appliance? My gut screamed, absolutely screamed, that the official story didn't sit right. Not with Mateo's warning. Why would he tell me to run, specifically me, and not just warn everyone if it was a simple accident? Unless it wasn't an accident at all. Unless something else, something far more sinister, was going on inside those walls. The cold dread intensified, spreading through my veins like poison. It wasn't just suspicion. It was a profound, bone-deep certainty that I had just narrowly escaped something deadly, something Julian had engineered. Every red flag I had ignored, every subtle manipulation, every hint of his financial desperation, every unsettling couple dinner in an odd place, every glimpse of Leo lurking in the shadows, they all coalesced into a terrifying, undeniable pattern. My ex, the father of my child, had just tried to put me in the middle of a disaster. The realization was sickening, making my stomach churn with a mixture of fear and a burgeoning righteous fury. I gripped the steering wheel even tighter, my knuckles aching, my eyes fixed on the distant glow of the inferno, a silent testament to the nightmare I had just, by the grace of a scared waiter, managed to outrun.